So far, we have the concept of folders. We have the default folders and the user created folders. We kind of had that separated out and shown in the left-hand nav panel. And we had the controller fetching it from the repository and putting it on the model, and then the template looking it up. We have to do pretty much the same thing for the list of emails as well. There are a few differences though, and then we will tackle them as we get there. But the overall concept is the same, right? We're going to define a model, which is going to map to a Cassandra table, right? You're going to have the add table annotation and define what the partition key, the clustering column, and all those things are. And then we're going to build a repository for it. The repository is going to help us fetch data from the database, put data to the database, okay? And then we're going to use the repository method in the controller to fetch the emails from the current user who's logged in and the folder that they've selected, right? These folders right now are just, it's a static list, but they need to be links. They need to be clickable so that somebody can click on inbox and see the emails for the inbox. Somebody can click on send items and see the messages for sent items, right? So we're going to get the currently logged in user and the folder that the user is in and send it to the repository and get back the list of messages that we're going to show in this email list section, right? That's what we want to do. I'm going to go to the editor here and let's start by creating that model, okay? Model is going to be very similar to what we have built for the model that we do have, okay? So we actually switch to the Java projects view, and here I'm going to create a new package. I'm thinking of calling it email list package because this is going to be different from the email package and the email model, which is like details about the email. This is basically a model which represents a line item in the list of emails that the user sees when they land on the inbox page, all right? So I'm going to create a new package here called email list, and I'm going to call this email list item, perhaps. And this is going to be the model. I'm going to say add table. And then the value is going to be, what did we call this? We call this messages by user and folder, right? We can skip the and. Some people have the convention of not having the and. It's messages by user underscore folder represents and. So makes the table name a little bit shorter. Doesn't matter either way. All right. So now I'm going to create a bunch of items in this thing. What did we have for our schema? We had this. Emails by user folder. Okay. We had the user ID. We had label, which is the folder label. And we had the ID, which was the Thymeleaf ID, because we want to sort the messages that we get in reverse chronological order. And we had things that we want to show in the line item for the list, right? We had the to, we had the subject, and then that's about it. We didn't need the body because it doesn't show up in the listing page. Body shows up only when you're viewing a single message. And then we had an is read Boolean to indicate whether that message needs to be shown in bold or regular, right? If it's read, it's regular. If it hasn't been read, then it's shown in bold, okay? So this is the information that we want to save for each item and entry in the email list, right? The user ID, label, and the Thymeleaf ID are the primary keys. All right, so I'm going to create those over here. I'm going to create a private string ID, which is going to be the user ID. Private string label, which is the folder label, and then the private UUID, time UUID. Okay. These are the three properties that we need for the primary key, right? This is, these two are going to be the partition keys, and this is going to be a clustering column, right? So I'm going to annotate them that way so that they do get indicated as primary keys. I'm going to mark this at primary key column. Very similar to what we did for folder, right? We have this thing. I'll copy this and paste this there. All right. We're going to have the primary key column for this guy. And this can be the name user ID is fine. Ordinal 0. And the type is primary key type dot partition, because this is going to be the partition key. Okay. The label is going to be a partition key as well. Okay. I'm going to call this label. Ordinal is 1, and this is also going to be a partition key. Time UUID is going to be a clustered column. Okay. This is not partition. This one's going to be clustered. And the ordinal is 2. And I'm going to call this created time UUID. Okay. Now here is a problem when you have multiple properties which represents the primary key. Okay. You're going to encounter the problem later when you're creating a repository, and I'm going to preempt that because I know that's coming. So let's take this folder, for example. All right. We had a folder class, which was the which had a primary key of a string, right? So it was a string. So in the folder repository, what did we do to define the Cassandra repository? We said Cassandra repository of folder and string. All right. This is the entity that we are creating a repository for, and this is the primary key. Okay. Now you can see what the problem is over here. Now here we have the primary key, which is the ID here. This one's a primary key. This one's another primary key. And this one's a clustering column, which is also a part of the primary key. Now, what are we going to put in that item? I cannot put all 3 of them, right? We need a type to put in that item. Like, what is the type of the primary key? So because of that reason, I cannot have these properties in the entity class itself. I'm going to have to create a new type. I'm going to create a primary key class type and stick these 3 properties in it, and then refer to the primary key as an instance of that type, right? Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to create a new Java class here, which is going to be called email list item key. Okay. List item key. And the whole point of this class is to act as a type for the primary key so that I can give it to the repository. Right? That's the whole purpose of this class. I'm going to import all the classes, and I'm going to generate getters and setters here. Source action, generate getters and setters for all of them. All right. And now I can use this as a type for the primary key here. I'm going to say private ID or key or whatever I want to call it. Okay. This is going to make things a little bit simple because now I can use this as the type for the primary key. Now, since this is a primary key class, I need to annotate this with the annotation. No surprises, primary key class. Okay. I'm basically telling the Spring Data infrastructure that this is meant to be a class which represents the primary key for this entity. Now that I have this, I can annotate this with primary key and tell, hey, this is my primary key. Okay. So this is how you manage the repository pattern while there are multiple properties which, together form your primary key. All right. And we have this. What else do we need? We need the to, the subject, and is unread. So I'm going to create those as well. Private string to. Now, it's not a string. It's a list of string. Okay. I'm going to mark this as a list of string because a message can potentially go to multiple people, right? Multiple recipients. Private string subject. And private string, you don't need the body. This is going to be a Boolean. Is unread. Okay. Now, these are going to be like what we did for folder. These are just going to have the Cassandra type annotation. Okay. So this is going to be a Cassandra type annotation of type string. Name is from Cassandra core mapping Cassandra type.name. Okay. This is going to be a Cassandra type of list. Okay. But when something is a list, I need to specify what's the type of each element. And that is where type arguments come into the picture. I don't need to name dot text, not string. Name dot text, right? I'm basically saying this is going to be a list item, but then each element in the list is of type text. All right. And then this Boolean is pretty straightforward. This is a Boolean type. And then the Cassandra type is Boolean. All right. Now I'm going to generate getters and setters for all of them, please. So now I have this messages by user folder over here. Next is to create the repository. Now you know the drill. It's basically the same process over and over again. So this part isn't exciting. What's exciting is what we do with this, right? So I'm going to quickly knock off the repository next, right? So this is going to be email list item repository. Okay. This is going to be an interface, which is going to extend the Cassandra repository. So I'm going to copy paste this guy here. All right. What are the types that it needs? This one's going to be email list item. And then the second type is going to be email list item key. All right. Now I have everything I need. Now, we're going to have the same problem as we did with the folder repository, in which case we had to find all by ID. Well, there was not a default method to find everything by ID. I had to define this here. So I'm going to do the same thing for the email list item repository as well. Right? So I'm going to create a find all by ID method. Now, this one is going to be the key that I need to fetch by. And what I'm going to get back is the email list item. Okay, so now I'm all set to fetch a bunch of these, right? I'm going to give it the email list item key. And what am I giving it here? I'm giving the probably not, because you notice here I'm going to have to provide the created time UUID as well, which is not what we want. We want to provide the user ID and the label, and we want to get everything that has the created time UUID. Okay. For that, I'm going to have to do something else. I'm not going to get this. I'm going to have to create a method with the field names in the method name. Okay. This is how it's going to look like. So it's going to be something like this. Find all by, we're not going to pass in the ID. We are going to get the ID's ID. And we're going to get the ID's label, right? Those are the two things we need to pass, all right? So we're going to say find all by ID underscore ID. All right. I'm basically saying get me everything by two properties, right? Let me backtrack here. So what are the two arguments that we need to pass? When we are fetching all emails for a given user and a given folder, we need to pass the two arguments. One is who is the user, and second is what's the folder for the user, right? So I'm going to pass in two arguments here, a string ID and string the folder label, right? These are the two things we're going to give it to this method, and this method is going to give back a list of email list item, right? Going to get a list of emails that we can show. All right. So we're going to pass in these two. Now, how are we going to tell the Spring Data library that these are the two things we're passing in? Because the names ID and label don't exist on the email list item itself, right? There's no property called ID and label, so it doesn't know. What we need to do is tell it, hey, go to the key and look up the ID, and go to the key and look up the label. So the way to do that is by saying find all by key underscore ID, key underscore, what's it called, label. Okay. It's a little clumsy. I think there's not underscore, it's and key underscore label, right? It's a little clumsy, but what it's going to do is you're basically defining what are your where clauses over here. You're passing these two as an argument, but you need to tell it what to apply to. So here I'm saying find all by the keys ID and the keys label, right? Key underscore ID and key underscore label, right? You're passing in the key underscore ID over here, and the key underscore label over here, they're going to map to the corresponding, properties that you've defined in your where clause. Essentially, anything after the by is going to be considered as things that it's going to look up using the where clause. All right. So with this, now I can give it the user ID and the label, and it's going to give me all of the emails for that user ID and label, right? And now what's left to do is go to the controller and fetch this thing. But before we fetch that, I'm going to have to seed some data. We don't even have data here, right? So I'm going to go to the inbox-app.java, and I'm actually going to seed some data here, just like I'm doing this over here. You see this? I'm creating a bunch of user folders. I am also going to seed some emails as well. All right. I'm going to place this here. I'm going to get this repository dependency injected over here. And now when I do this, let for content I++, I'm going to create 10 message listings in this thing. All right. So what do I need to do? First, I need to get the email list item primary key. I'm going to set that up, right? Key, new email list item primary key, import key.set ID is going to be my ID because I want to see it after I log in. So obviously, if you're doing this at your end, you're going to have to enter your ID so that you can see it when you've logged into GitHub. Next, I'm going to do key.set label. I'm going to put this into the inbox. And then I'm going to do key.set time UUID to be UUIDs. Well, it's UUIDs, not all caps. It's first U cap and the rest small. What you're going to get here is a class from COM data stacks, OSS driver, API, and such. All right. This is the package where you're importing it from, right? So it's a UUID utility which allows you to generate time UUIDs. Okay. So I'm going to say UUIDs dot, I think there should be a time-based. Yeah, there is a time-based UUID, right? So I'm going to create something which has meaning in time, which is what we want, right? We want it to be sorted in reverse chronological order. So here's my key. My key is ready. And now I need to create an instance of the email list item itself. All right. So I'm going to say email list item equals new email list item. Import again. Item dot set key as the key. Item dot set to, this can be anything. I'm going to set it to myself. Okay, so that I can see this message both in my sent items and in my inbox. Okay, this is a list, not a single string. So I'm going to do arrays that has list of this one string, right? I'm going to set it as a string. And then item dot set. If we don't have a from, subject is going to be subject, and then I'm going to append I here. So it's going to be subject 0, subject 1, subject 2, and so on. And then item dot, what else do we have? That unread to be, oh, I'm going to make it true, right? So these are unread. And then finally, I'm going to have to persist this item, right? So where's my repository? This is email item list repository. So I'm going to say email item list repository dot save of item. Okay, this is going to happen in a loop, and this is going to insert 10 items into the repository. I'm going to save this, and let's have this thing restart. I'm going to go back to my database, go to the SQL console, and I'm going to say use main, and then select start from, what's it called? Messages by user folder. And here are the 10 messages that we have just managed to insert, right? You see this? This one's a time UUID. This is the UUID that is generated for us, and it has some meaning in time. We can actually use the API to get the timestamp back from this thing, which is really cool. And we're going to be using that for displaying when this email was sent, because this is the only proof we have. This is the only data point we have about when the email was sent, and that time is embedded into this UUID. We can extract it. But other than that, you have, the subject, from the true created is under this true subject, user ID and label. All right. Looks good. Next, now that we have this, I'm going to have to fetch this information from in the controller. Okay. Now, how do I fetch that information? I'm going to go to the controller, which is the inbox controller. And over here, we are fetching all of the folders that the user has, right? These are all the folders. So I'm going to mark this as such. Fetch folders. And now we're going to have to fetch messages. Okay. I'm going to go back here and copy the email repository and dependency inject this over here. Oh, it's already there. I'm just going to mark this as private and import the class. Now I have the repository. I'm going to have to send both. What are the two things I need? I need the folder and the label. What's the label? By default, I want the label to be inbox, right? The user ID we already have. The label by default is going to be inbox. We will probably need to accept that as a parameter, right? Some kind of a query parameter. Like when somebody clicks on sent items, we need to send that as a query parameter so that we can retrieve it over here, right? We need some clue when I'm retrieving messages to show. I need to know which folder I'm in. So I can probably accept that as a query parameter and show it. Right now, I'm going to hard code this to inbox, okay? So I'm going to say string folder label equals inbox. For those of you, if you're cringing in the fact that I have the string inbox in multiple places, yes, it's a very good idea to have that as an enum or as a constant somewhere else in a different file. Maybe I'll get to it when I'm using this many more times. At this point, I'm just using it as a hard-coded string over here, right? And I have the user ID as well. Now what I need to do is call that repository dot find by key ID and key label. The first parameter is user ID, and the second parameter is the folder label. Okay, and this is going to go to a local variable. I'm going to call the email list. Okay, so this is what I have. I have the email ID list item repository dot find, which is the method that we use. I'm passing in the user ID and the folder label. When I have the email list, I'm going to put that on the model as well, just like I did over here, right? I get this guy over here. And then this is going to be email list. Okay, I have the list of emails. Now I can go to the inbox page and display that. Okay, so I'm going to go to the inbox page.html. And how do I display this? I'm going to display this over here, right? The email list page. I'm basically going to copy the th for each that we already have, because it's going to be very similar, right? I'm probably even going to have the same card here. So I'm going to get up to this point, and then can I use that over, right? So I'm going to paste this stuff here. So this is going to contain a card. And this is not going to be panel name. This is not th:\text. I'm going to remove this. And I need to give this the name of the folder, right? I'm just going to give it inbox for now. But basically, I'm going to be showing a listing, just like you've seen there. But there's going to be a listing of, well, actually, let me look up the Bootstrap website for a proper listing, which contains like this. multiple lines here. I'm going to go here to, there should be something. Yeah, something like this, right? Something like this would be good. It also has the 3 days ago thing, which can be a really cool thing. Let's say we can implement that. The message was received 2 hours ago or 25 minutes ago. Let's try and implement that too. All right, so I'm going to copy this thing and use this for the list. Okay, I'm going to change this card body. The UL is going to go away, and I'm going to paste this guy here. And of course, I'm going to have to change this so that you don't have multiple of these. Just one should be enough, right? I have the anchor tag here. One anchor tag is enough. The other stuff can go away, because we're going to be doing the th:\each. I think active is what caused this thing to be blue. So I'm going to remove active as well. You don't want to have that highlighted. And similarly, area current is not current anymore. Now I'm going to go back to the folder list, basically copy this th:\each and use the th:\each for this anchor tag. And what is it that I'm looping over? This is going to be email, or I'm going to call this message. And what am I looping over? I am looping over email list. Okay, so I'm going to go here and loop over email list. This is fine. The href is going to change later. Class is fine. Now here, I'm going to show the subject. Okay, so there's going to be th:\text equals the $curly. What's the subject? The subject is message.subject. Okay, I'm going to put that here. Message.subject. And then we're going to leave that as is. We don't need do we need a paragraph? We probably need the to, right? So I'm going to leave all those things as is. Maybe put the to here and see what happens. I think what it does is it puts, like if you're printing a list, it prints a square bracket around it, which is fine, kind of fine. I'm just going to put it out and see how that looks like. Okay. And I'm going to do message.to is going to be displayed here. Fine print, small print, we don't need. Save. Now I am looping through email list. If email list exists, I'm going to loop through that and print a bunch of these anchor tags. And I'm going to print the subject and I'm going to print the to for each item. I'm putting this inside a card called inbox. I have no idea what this looks like. We will see if this even works. All right. Refresh. I have to log in. Okay, not bad. I'm seeing the subjects here. So these are the 10 messages that I seeded for inbox, right? And showing the to over here, which is fine. Not bad. I'm going to change this now. How do I get the time? I can just show the time as is, but that's not fun. I want to show like how long back this message was received, all right? That's going to be cool. So I'm going to maybe use, I think there is a library called PrettyTime or something like that. Let's see. PrettyTime Java. Yeah, I think this is what it is. So this one actually, yeah, you see this? This is what it does. You use PrettyTime to format a timestamp into something like this, so many moments from now, right? So the new date is moments from now. Something which is older is 10 minutes from now, right? 10 minutes ago or whatever, 2 days ago or whatever, right? So this is pretty cool. This is what I want to use, right? So what I'm going to do is get this dependency here and convert the timestamp into a text like this, a string like this, 5 minutes ago. And I'm going to put this on the email list title, right? I'm going to create a property here. And for each email that I'm going to get, I'm going to run it through this PrettyTime API. And I'm going to get how long ago it was, put that as a property on this thing. And then I can use that in my template, right? I'm going to substitute that with the result of running it through this API, all right? So I'm going to go here first to pom.xml. I'm going to add this dependency, which I pasted. No formatter installed. That's fine. I'm just going to do a manual formatting over here. I thought I had an XML formatter. Never mind. Right, I'm going to save this and have, VS Code fetch this automatically for me. Okay, so now I have this dependency. Now I can use this in my controller. I'm going to have the email list. I'm going to run it through this API. What's this API? What do I call this? I'm going to get pretty time, and then I'm going to get a new instance of pretty time, and then that instance dot format. All right, that's fairly easy. So I'm going to get the pretty time instance here. All right, so I'm going to do pretty time. This new pretty time. And then what do? I just do that instance dot format of the date. Okay. So what I need to do this is, I'm not doing it one time. I'm doing it for each and every email in this list. All right. So I'm going to have to, create a stream and then do this for each one of them. All right. So I'm going to say email list dot stream dot, what seems to have broken the compilation. What have I done wrong? The version is missing over here. All right, so I'm going to find the version in Sky. Be good. Stick that in here so that the jar can be fetched, and hopefully things are going to be found now. Okay, so I'm going to get a stream, and then for each item in that stream, I need to find out the timestamp and then do a pretty time on that thing. I'm going to call this email item. And then for each email item, I'm going to get the timestamp. What is the timestamp? I have to go to the email list items key. I'm going to do a get key, and then I'm going to get the time UUID for that key. Okay, that's how I get the timestamp. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to get email item dot get key dot get time UUID is going to give me the UUID, which is the UUID for this email item. Okay. Now from this UUID, I can get the timestamp. I can get the Unix timestamp, and I'm again going to use the same UUIDs utility from the Calm Data Stack Sources driver. We've been using this to generate the time UUID already. So I'm going to use a method called Unix timestamp of UUID. Okay. So I'm going to say time UUID, and this is going to give me the Unix timestamp. Now I can create a new date from it. I'm going to say new date of this guy is going to give me the date object for when that email was sent. Okay. Email date time. Okay. It's going to give me the exact time when that email was sent. Java util date, please. And now I can pass this to the pretty time API. All right, let's see what this looks like. It's basically p format of the data object, which is what we have over here, right? So I'm going to do p format of email date time is going to give us a string, which is going to be these many hours ago or these many, days ago or whatever. Now I can put this on the email item, but I don't have anything to put this on, right? So email item is basically email list item, and it has just these properties. I will have to create a new property so that I can put this on top of this. All right. But at the same time, I don't want to have this be something that persists to the database, right? It has to be something that's applicable only for the view, just for rendering purposes. but then it should not save to the database. So the way to do that is by creating a property and marking it as at transient. So for example, if I were to create a private string, I'm going to call it, I don't want to call it pretty time because I might change the library later. Let's say a go time string, right? It's like basically contains how long ago something happened. It's a time string which represents that. And this is going to be a transient, right? Now, this is arg Spring Framework data annotation, okay? Now, by marking this as transient, I'm basically saying I don't want this to be persisted in the database. So this is not going to be involved in schema creation. If I set something here and then I give it to the repository and say, hey, save it, it's not going to consider this property allowed. It's basically going to ignore it, okay? Which is what we want. This property is just for UI purposes. So I'm going to create getters and setters for that thing. And now I can use that property to set this ago time on it, right? So I'm going to say email item dot set ago time string to be, this is p dot format of the date time. So I'm doing this for each and every email, each and every message that I get, okay? I'm doing this for each. So every email item that we have is going to have the ago time set on it. Once that is done, I am going to put that on the model like we've already done. And now let's go back to my HTML, the inbox page.html, and let's try and display that, right? So it's going to be th:\text equals message dot, what did I call it? Ago time string, okay? Ago time string. All right, and this should ideally show, this much time ago. Let's see how this works. I don't have it running. I'm going to start this up. Go back here. Refresh this. Wait till it starts. Okay, the application seems to have started. I'm going to sign in and I'm going to get moments ago because we literally just created it. I'm hoping that if I, refresh this page after maybe 2 minutes, it's going to say 2 minutes ago because the server just started up and we insert these emails when the server started up. So moments ago makes sense. I'm going to pause this and refresh this after a while because I'm curious to see what happens. Right? I'm going to pause for a minute and then we'll see what happens after that. Okay, it's been about 1 or 2 minutes. I'm going to refresh this and let's see how this displays. Okay, 2 minutes ago seems fine. So this seems to be working fine. So now that we have this complete, I'm going to commit this as a change that you can refer to get this state of the code from here on, right? So now that this is done, we are going to move on to the next entity, which is the message itself, right? So now we have the list of messages showing up over here. Now I want to be able to click on a message and read the message, right? So that will be the third entity and the third Cassandra table that we're going to build, which is the message itself. So we will check that out in the next tutorial.